Hey everyone, welcome back to Swan Signal Live. I am Swan's head of education, Brady Swinson, here to host a great show that I'm really excited about. We've got Aarika Rhodes, who is running for Congress. She's going to run in the primary against Brad Sherman in Southern California. And we've got Alex Gladstein as well, the CSO of the Human Rights Foundation. Before we dive into the episode, I just want to take a second to talk about Bitcoin and its importance in the world and why we have started Swan Bitcoin to promote Bitcoin for those reasons. We believe that Bitcoin is the way to an option, a way to opt out of centralized control money. And we've seen many harms come about in the world from and lack of justice and fairness from monies. And we believe that Bitcoin is an important alternative as an open source technology that's decentralized and in control of no single person or small group of people. And that fact, the mere existence of Bitcoin gives hope to a lot of people in this world who otherwise would not have it because they're living under the control or under the dictates of a controlled money. Swan is here to help you accumulate Bitcoin with automatic recurring buys, instant buys, and we can accept wire buys up to $10 million. So we do serve large entities, corporations, nonprofits, trust accounts, and individuals as well with our service Swan Private at swanbitcoin.com/private. But our bread and butter and our heart lies in helping people accumulate Bitcoin as much as possible and in the easiest way possible at the lowest possible fees. So you can go to swanbitcoin.com and start your process there. You can sign up within 5-10 minutes. It's one of the fastest onboarding processes in the industry, really painless, and we're proud of that. We get a lot of feedback about how incredibly fast the onboarding process was and how much people appreciate that. The UI of the system itself, of the app itself, is fantastic, really easy to use. And we are, of course, Bitcoin only, so there's no noise from altcoins like you might get on Kraken or Coinbase. We're just here to help you accumulate Bitcoin for the long term and educate you about what's going on here. And one of the ways that we do that is with this show, Swan Signal Live. And today I'll bring on Aarika Rhodes and Alex Gladstein. Oops. There we go. All right. This is Aarika. Hi, Aarika.
Hi. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Excited to have you here. And Alex Gladstein, thanks for coming back, man.
Hey, happy to be here.
All right. So let's kick this thing off with talking a little bit about Aarika. I know that most of the audience here will recognize and know about Alex's work in the space. So Aarika, tell us about your journey into politics and why you have decided to run in the California 30 primary against Brad Sherman.
Yeah, so my name is Aarika Rhodes. I ended up getting heavily involved in politics this last Democratic primary. I was a big Andrew Yang supporter, partly because I love the fact that he was one of the only candidates really emphasizing the importance of financial literacy in schools. He was talking about education and modernizing it, automation, technology, and I just felt like he understood that we need to evolve and that the systems in place are not working for everyday people. And so I campaigned for him, I canvassed for him in Iowa, New Hampshire, Nevada, and obviously in California, and then he suspended. But I was like, these are some really amazing policies, especially with like campaign finance and education. And so I just filed. And our campaign literally took off. So I filed June of last year, and we immediately became viable within the first 6 months of running. And now we are here in a position to unseat Brad Sherman. Brad and I have different approaches with what it means to be a leader. We definitely take on different policy positions. And I think it's time. I think that if you are in Washington, it's not just casting votes. I think to me, it's like more than that. It's actually being a public servant and serving in your community. And so I'm really excited about our race. I'm excited about the policies in which I'm advocating for. For me, I want to be very clear with everyone. This is very important. My end goal is to be on the Education and Labor Committee in Congress. Financial literacy is something I really want to make happen and really modernize our curriculum and invest in young people. I think that's imperative. And I definitely don't agree with the ban on Bitcoin. And so that is one of the reasons why I'm excited to have this conversation And I appreciate both you and Alex. I think you guys are both extraordinary people, and I'm really excited to be here.
Awesome. I'm excited for your race. And, you know, we in the Bitcoin community have been talking a lot about Brad Sherman for quite a while, and his very, I guess I should say, like, loud and direct stance against Bitcoin and calling for an outright ban. And I want to dive into some of Brad's stances later and talk about them as well. But you mentioned that you're very passionate, and you are an educator, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Primarily.
I teach K through 6th grade science this year.
Yeah. So I know that education is obviously important to you. Why financial literacy in particular?
You know, I'm just going to start with a true story. So I was talking to a group of high school kids, and we were talking about the difference between a debit and credit card. And two of the kids said, with a credit card, you have to pay the money back. And that in and of itself was alarming, is that kids didn't even realize, high school kids did not even realize that they had to pay their monthly payment on their credit card bill, that they just thought that was free money. And I think we have a responsibility as adults to ensure that as kids go into college and as they go and embark on their life, that they understand what the importance of finance, how to file for taxes, what compound interest is, how to save for retirement, the difference between a debit and credit card, how to invest. I just think all those things are imperative, and we're not teaching it. And that is why it's so hard for young kids to have ownership of their life, to purchase homes, to purchase, stocks or crypto. Like, a lot of young kids that support my campaign actually have invested into Bitcoin, right? So I just feel like we have a responsibility to make sure that kids are informed and that they are aware of the opportunities and options that they have. And I do think that entrepreneurship is something that we should explore with kids. I think, I think this is the moment for entrepreneurship. With the pandemic, we saw in the Forbes data that came out that more and more people are becoming business owners. But you can't be a successful business owner or start your own business if you don't even understand just straight finance. And so I just think it's really important. And the student loan debt is so high. And so when kids are taking out these loans, they don't even realize how much money they're going to have to pay. They just don't understand interest rates. And so those are some of the reasons why. And I just think it should be common knowledge.
100%. Alex, do you have any thoughts about financial literacy in this country and around the world?
Yeah, I think no matter who you speak to, they will relate to you that children, young people, as Aarika says, are not being taught about these things. And hey, maybe Bitcoin can be a teacher. I think that where many institutions and individuals, and honestly even families, maybe fail to teach children about savings and the future and being careful with taking on debt. Our current system is built to on-ramp people as much as possible into as much debt as possible. And this is not just in California or Texas or Florida or New York. I was speaking to people in a variety of different countries around the world, including obviously most recently in the West Bank when I was doing my piece on Palestine. And these young people in Ramallah are being encouraged to take out massive loans to finance consumerist goods, and to not invest in companies or into land or into business or into their future. And that is a global phenomenon. Now, some countries have better cultures about instilling financial education than others, but most, in fact, I would say all, fail to do it at a high enough level that we need to be at as a society. So maybe where the schools are failing and where our government is failing, and even where honestly some families are failing, maybe Bitcoin can be that teacher, because when you dive into it and learn about it, you start to really think about different kinds of money, and you start to think about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years into the future, and you start to think about leaving stuff behind for your children and their children and a longer legacy. And it just makes you be a little more careful about spending. It makes you think harder about investing. It makes you think more about savings, and it makes you think more about speculating and spending perhaps, on what's unnecessary. And I think it sounds strange because it's just this open source money project. It's just software, right? But it's really about the people behind the software. And when you mix the people with the software, you do get this effect, no matter where you live, no matter what language you speak or what you look like or where you come from. It does kind of like change people, and it makes them think more about the future. And I think that's why it's so important to be part of any financial literacy class. Aarika talks about how kids don't know the difference between debit cards, credit cards. Once you learn more about Bitcoin, it helps you put everything in context. So if you have Bitcoin as part of a financial literacy program, I mean, those communities are going to kill it. I loved seeing what Isaiah Jackson's doing out there, educating young people. He's been doing that for 5 years, and a lot of those young kids who he taught 5 years ago are doing really well right now.
Yeah.
Because and that was through a bull market, a bear market, another. That was through the thick and thin. It doesn't matter. They're all doing a hell of a lot better than they were 5 years ago if they followed his advice. So I'm all about seeing a big plank of financial literacy, but really in like an accurate way. Not that we need to find a way for the government to just pay off the student loans. That's like a band-aid on a problem. The bigger problem is like, should I be taking the student loan? Is that really worth it for me? Is that something that's going to really help my career? What if I were to take that money instead and put it into maybe starting a business right now? Or like, these are conversations we need to be having. So I certainly applaud Aarika for putting financial literacy and Bitcoin, into her platform.
And that's I echo what you're saying. Like, that's the thing, is that we have to create a space where we can have these conversations with young people and let them acquire the knowledge so they can make the best decisions for themselves. Like, I personally don't even think college is for everyone. We don't talk about trade school. We don't talk about other options or ways that you can have a lucrative and successful life. It's always like, you do this, you check off all these boxes, and then you're going to magically be successful. But that's not always the case. We've seen time and time again where people check off all those boxes, they do the right thing, and then they have massive, massive debt, and they're not successful. And that goes into your self-esteem and confidence and mental health and all these other things. So I really believe if we really start talking about financial literacy at a very young age, and kids acquire that knowledge, when they get older and it's time to invest or take out loans, etc., they can make more informed decisions. Like, if you're in a kindergarten class and I'm teaching kids the difference between a penny, nickel, and quarter, well, we could talk about savings and like, we have piggy banks, and we put, well, if I put, all these quarters and now we save them up at the end of the year, how much money do I have? Just there's so many ways we can bake in financial literacy in our school system. I think it's important. And I also think when we talk about poverty, I also had the honor of talking to Isaiah. He is so sweet. We have to really look at who are getting these loans. People of color have been completely, they have been, there's this portion of, who gets access to these loans and who is able to participate in the financial market. And I think, after talking to him, and he really explained how Bitcoin opens it up for all people to be able to have ownership over their life, I think that's worth considering. I don't know everything about Bitcoin. I'm very honest about that. I'm learning. I was Dennis, who is becoming a really cool friend of mine. He has been giving me literature and books to read, and we've been having conversations. I've had the opportunity to talk to many Bitcoin influencers, and they have share their knowledge. And I really believe that we have to allow people to make decisions that are best for them and the investments that reflect their lives. And I think that's really important.
Yeah. Shout out to Dennis Parker, right? Who's been talking to you. Yeah. Shout out to Dennis. I appreciate his involvement. Yeah, and I think it's absolutely true about financial literacy. I certainly did not receive any financial literacy education in my school. I mean, I was taught by my parents.
Me neither. I went to a good public school in Connecticut, and we had nothing all the way through 12th grade. I had one optional business class I took, but they didn't teach you about any sort of personal finance. Personal finance was not on the menu. And by the time you get to college, it's like, oh, well, that's not what. We're not going to at a nice college. We're not going to offer how to use a credit card. because
Right.
you should know that already. But
Right.
where did you learn it? Like it's just assumed that the family will teach it. Well, what if the family has, bad habits or whatever, or, thinks that that's not for them, or doesn't want to teach entrepreneurship for whatever reason. So it's just such a big gap. And again, Bitcoin is a great teacher. And, if it can't be provided by the school, people's curiosity will lead them to a broader understanding. Like what I'd like to see is it's a little tough before eighth grade or so, but like I'd like to see in high school like a Bitcoin class, and this would be like in several tracks. One would be computer science. You learn how to code, of course, and you learn how to contribute to Bitcoin. That's like through high school, through 4 years, you would start with no knowledge of how to code, and by the time you're graduating, you will have made your first commit to Bitcoin. Like that would be amazing, right? And then on the other side, you have history, right? This is very important. You have economic history of the United States. So what was our currency in the Revolutionary Era? What was our currency in the Civil War? What was our currency 100 years ago? What happened during Nixon in 1971? Like we need to learn, our children need to learn about the economic and financial and monetary history of the United States. This is so important, and it's completely hidden from everybody, no matter how privileged you are, no matter whether you go to a public school or a private school, or you're super wealthy and you go to an elite. Nobody learns about monetary history. In fact, it's totally hidden from the elites. If you like the people who go to prep schools and stuff, they don't know what the Nixon shock was. So like we talk about the way money has changed in our society, and an easy way to think about it is that, of course, it's like a meme at this point, but there's like that image of a dollar with a graph over it with its like declining purchasing power over time. This idea of purchasing power is not even talked about. Maybe you learn about it in college if you study international development, and you learn about something like GDP per capita in developing countries. No. What about here in the United States? Like what is purchasing power? Why do certain assets appreciate more than others? Why has it been a bull market in bonds since the early 1980s? These are important things for high school people to know about. So you have that piece. And then you have the using it piece, right? So it's really like the coding, and there you learn about computer science, you learn how to code. Then you learn about economic and political history of the United States in a way that nobody else wants to teach. And then, which by the way is bipartisan, meaning like people who are anti-war progressives, I'm sure they want to teach their kids about the fact that Nixon floated the dollar to go fight in Vietnam. I think that's an important thing for them to know, much as it would be for conservatives or libertarians or whatever. Like everybody has a right to know about these things, no matter where they come from politically. And then the third piece would be usage. Okay, like how to download a wallet, like how to receive Bitcoin, how to use Lightning, how to run a node, all those things, right? Which require no technical knowledge at all. So you'd have like practice history code, right, as a class in high school that you would take throughout 4 years. I mean, we would build an incredible society if we did this. Now, I don't think we're going to do it in public schools, but it could be offered online. We can build it together. We can offer it, and families can teach it. And if they won't do it, the Bitcoin community will do it. The Bitcoin community is doing it. We are teaching people about money. So, that's the exciting part. If you're part of the Bitcoin community, you're part of this great educational experience where all of us are learning. I mean, most Bitcoiners didn't know anything about monetary history before they learned about Bitcoin.
My most engaged tweet of all time, Alex, is I am still astonished that I didn't know anything about money until Bitcoin.
Yeah, I mean, Arrika,
it very much resonates.
I knew zero about the monetary history of the United States before probably my second or third year of getting into Bitcoin. For me, it's been a many-year experience, but like I'm really, the orange pill takes you down many levels, but these are things that like all kids should know,
One of the saddest things that I saw canvassing for Andrew was this woman cashing in her change at a Coinstar. Do you guys know what Coinstar is?
Of course.
Yeah, she was literally cashing in all of her change so she could pay a bill and have some money to pay for food. And the interest rate on the Coinstar, like when you cash in all of the change, how much money gets taken out of that was really hard to watch. That was one of the saddest things I've ever seen. And from my understanding with Bitcoin, when you make the transactions, it's just like person to person. There's like no middleman, and that you're not losing. You get like the full value of the transaction of your dollar. Is that correct? Am I understanding that correctly?
If you use Lightning, pretty much. I mean, there's a very, very tiny fee that gets.
It's nowhere near like a coin.
Yeah, no. It's like less than it's like way less than a penny, and it basically helps. It helps remunerate the people who are helping move your payment along. On the main chain, of course, you pay a fee to the miners, and that might be today. I know the fees are crazy today. They're like 20 cents or something. But I think it's reasonable to expect that over the coming decade, that if you want to do a main chain Bitcoin transaction, it'll cost you. But the cool thing is we have Lightning, so when you have these people who need to make these quick transactions, to send money to their family, to buy weekly things, yes, it'll essentially have no fee, and there's no middleman taking it. It's like people in a peer-to-peer network. So I would agree. I don't know. What do you think about that, Brady?
Yeah, I mean, I think the fees will get pushed up the layers, the layer stacks. If you think of Lightning as a second layer, lower fees because it's utilizing the base chain. But I think there'll be even lower fees. Yeah.
You know who takes a lot of fees? The banks. During the pandemic, the amount of money that they made in just fees during the pandemic was horrendous.
Yeah, we don't need the banks. I mean, you can earn in Bitcoin. You could be your own bank, and you can pay out your employees in Bitcoin, and you can save in Bitcoin. I mean, look, in the coming years, you're going to be able to borrow in Bitcoin, whether you want to trust a custodian or not. And you'll be able to start replicating almost every useful aspect of the financial system in the Bitcoin world, without having to facilitate the banking system, which has been systematically discriminatory. The fiat system is discriminatory, like it literally is. It discriminates. It favors the wealthy who are closest to the money printer in Washington, and it basically favors corporations, and that's why they get bailed out first. It literally is discriminatory. Bitcoin, one of the reasons I'm so passionate about it as a tool for the people is that it literally cannot discriminate. Like, it doesn't know who you are. It is completely neutral and open. And this is why it's so important for, I think, communities around the country to learn about today, is because they are at the same level as anybody else. Like, it doesn't fix or claim to address like equality of outcome. It's not going to do that. It's not going to fix poverty. Like, that's not, these are things that need to be fixed by societies and by communities, and we need to bring each other up and work more closely together. But what it does fix 100% is equality of opportunity. Like, it makes sure that like nobody has a special deal, okay? That no matter whether you're a student just downloading your first Bitcoin for the first time and buying $5 of it and saving it, or whether you're Brad Sherman or some elite connected person who has millions of dollars, no longer does Brad get like a special deal over the student. In the Bitcoin world, they're equal, and I think that's very powerful.
There's a supporter of mine, and Bitcoin pulled her out of poverty. And I was like, well, what do you mean? And she said, well, so she was a vet, and she ended up homeless, and she made this investment early on, and Bitcoin obviously took off, and it completely changed her life.
No, and let me rephrase that. Bitcoin absolutely has saved millions of people from poverty. I mean, literally, like as we speak today, I mean, Bitcoin is helping millions of people around the world who are in a high inflationary environment, who are behind financial walls, who are in some sort of broken economic infrastructure. It is out there doing the hard work that very few others are willing to do, and that researchers and that the World Bank and all these institutions are failing to do. Bitcoin is helping where they are failing. What I meant is that like it doesn't, it's not going to be doing any redistributionary stuff here. It's a fair and open, neutral monetary network that gives you what you put into it.
Fair access.
It does not. It's not going to be like printing money and airdropping it on people.
That's why just say, I get that you can't like ban it, but the fact that you're putting out that negative information is the issue that I take with it, without doing your due diligence, without doing the research, without talking to people that support it or invest. And you can't just, and you're doing it because, and I'm talking about Brad, because you're getting all of your money from the big banks.
He's getting paid off by the banks.
So it's like, you're not really, like, that's the public servant piece. If you're really serving people, you're not just gonna support your big donors or who you get all your money from. Like, our campaign only takes money from everyday people. I don't want big bank money, honestly, because I think they make it hard for people to get ahead in a lot of ways. And I want to be funded by people, truly, but when he's taking these positions, it's not in the best interest of people. It's in the best interest of his big donors. And
he's not going down to like the corner store and talking to his constituents about what they want. He's getting a phone call from a bank, and the bank is saying to him, Brad, like, we are worried about Bitcoin. We need you to be aggressive about it. We need you to talk about it like a tool for bad actors. We need you to be pushing restrictive policies that prevent Americans from getting into this thing. This is very important to us because it is competition for us.
And they're not getting their commissions.
Yeah. And meanwhile, you are liberated from that because you are not a slave to the banking system. So you can go down and talk to your potential future constituents and listen to what they have to say. And some of them are gonna, like, a lot of them are gonna be, people who use Cash App, who don't have a bank account. They're gonna be people who are, hey, they're involved in Bitcoin. Bitcoin is their bank for many of them. And you get to listen to them. So that makes you a very different candidate than Brad, who's like completely at the whim of the corporate banking sector, and that's like a broken democracy, in my opinion.
And it underscores the importance of campaign finance. The fact that I'm a teacher, okay? I've never thought about, like, oh, how am I going to raise millions of dollars before? It's just not like what you think about I'm not just a teacher, but when you're as a teacher, you're not thinking of millions and billions. Like, your mind doesn't go to those places. But as a candidate, to run a campaign, and I'm constantly thinking about, okay, we have to compete with this guy. We have to have $1 million. And then to see that all of his money comes from big banks, big corporations, big insurance companies, you're like, oh my God, like, I can't compete with that. And it's so, just from a campaign finance reform stance, candidates should not be allowed to take money from these big corporations. It should literally be by people. That's what I know. Some people in the Bitcoin community, I guess they've shared the opinion they don't like this, but I am for democracy dollars, where everyone gets, $100 to give to their candidate, so we can run a fair race. And it makes it easier for teachers, engineers, nurses, like firefighters, everyday people to run and serve their districts in their country. The fact that we have to raise $500,000 to $1 million to unseat him is wild to me. And he's not even trying to serve. And that's the disheartening part of all of it. And that's why I'm so actually excited that our campaign took Bitcoin, because one, it's kind of like, no, we're not going to promote banning it. That's number one. And number two, it's another way for a candidate to finance their campaign. And I think that's really cool. It just gives us another way of getting people involved in the process.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think there's a whole debate to be had about money as free speech. But ultimately, if Brad's going to take all this money from these banks, people should know about it. I mean, it's not widely known. Like, we had to kind of dig for that. There was like some journalism that came out about it. But yeah, I mean, there should be a large website that just says, yeah, I mean, here are Brad's supporters, and you can start to understand why he's so anti-Bitcoin.
And because you can easily follow the money.
Yeah,
you can easily follow the money. I mean, this is what we call the Cantillon effect, right? So it's, these guys, these big banks, especially the big national corporate banks that you'll know the names of, will get money from the printer at very low interest rates in Europe, at negative interest rates. Here, please, we'll pay you to take our money. And then they get to lend them down with their financial products at increasingly high interest rates down the tier until you get to something like a payday lender, which is, taking, I don't know how much, 50%. Yeah. And so that's why it's completely unfair. The rich get richer. It's a rigged system. And it's, the bottom, anybody basically without access to assets that are going to benefit at a similar rate, like stocks, for instance, are, just getting poorer and poorer in terms of purchasing power very quickly right now.
What's interesting is now we're also at the cusp of this new era of like Bitcoin in politics, which is now just beginning, both at the geopolitical level and also domestically, right? So for now, like Arrika, you're obviously very limited. Like, there's all these rules. Like if someone wants to give you Bitcoin, you have to like record their name and all these things, and you have to do it through one of these like custodial options. I understand the limitations. But what we're working towards is a more direct relationship between people and their elected officials, where it can be done in a parallel way where it doesn't have to go through the banking system, right? Like if we continue to be reliant on the banking system, they're going to continue to have all this power over us. So the goal will be to eventually, for me to be able to finance you if I want in Bitcoin through something like a BTC Pay server, completely parallel, and then, be able to send Lightning donations to you and stuff like that. I mean, that's not possible today, but we're going to get there. I think we're going to get there soon enough.
I think what people don't understand is there's so many rules and regulations with the FEC that candidates have to follow. And so like even this like accepting Bitcoin, the program that we had to use just for being able to, to show and like document or stuff for accounting purposes is not, ideal, but it's a really funky system. But I do think our government is outdated. I think that it needs to be modernized. And I do think that campaign finance is something that is something that needs to be talked about. It is. And it shouldn't, some of these races are in the hundreds of millions of dollars. And to me, I think that's crazy that for any candidate to get that kind of money just to run their campaign, I think that's just ridiculous.
We have just a few minutes. I know you have a hard stop in about 8 minutes. So I'm watching the clock, but I want to talk about some of Sherman's criticisms, and maybe we can rush through them and talk about them. And Alex, I'll throw this one to you first, and then we can dismiss this one pretty quickly. And there's 3 of them here. One is that volatility is harmful to small investors. So Sherman said that he'd rather let people buy lottery tickets than cryptocurrencies. What do you think about that? The volatility is harmful to people. They're going to lose all their money.
Just gaslighting. I mean, absolute gaslighting. The Bitcoin has, over the last 12 years, not just preserved purchasing power for the people who invested in it, but so dramatically appreciated their purchasing power that it's completely changed their lives. And he's trying to scare you away from it by saying it's dangerous, like it's like a lottery ticket. I'm sorry, virtually every single person who plays the lottery loses money. Virtually every single person who invested in Bitcoin over the last 10 years has not just protected their purchasing power, especially let's say before whatever the price is today, before February of this year. So over the last 11 years, as we go, through this cycle, has dramatically increased their purchasing power. We're not talking like 1%, 2%, 3% of users. I mean, the amount of people who win the lottery are like 0.00. It's like you have a better chance of getting hit by lightning. That very idea that he's trying to conflate the lottery with Bitcoin is so disingenuous and just absolutely ridiculous. And it shows you that he has an agenda, right? So, when he tries to paint Bitcoin as volatile and dangerous, it's not true. And again, it's part of this great gaslighting that a lot of politicians are out there to do.
Okay, so the next one he said was tax evasion and crime. He says that cryptocurrencies have the political sport of patriotic anarchists who are rooting for tax evasion. I hope we shut it down. Should the U.S. government and politician government, what do we should call them, government agents around the country be worried that cryptocurrency could circumvent the main form of income for governments, and therefore, delegitimize them or reduce their power in some way?
I mean, that's a big question. Interested to hear what Arrika says, but I mean, look, the world is changing, and you're going to have two options in the future as an American. You're going to have central bank digital currency run by the Fed coin, and then you're going to have Bitcoin. Okay, so it's really going to come down to like what this is ultimately the big picture. So as a politician, where are you going to stand? Are you going to stand for a country where citizens are at least going to have the option to have Bitcoin if they want? Or are you going to stand for a country where they're going to force you to use Fed coin? This is ultimately a kind of simplistic, but it really is, I think, in 10, 20 years, the truth. Like, they're going to get rid of cash, which is so important for like lower income, communities, so important for privacy, freedom, savings for a lot of people, not just in America, but around the world. And they're going to replace it with Fed coin. And that's going to give them the ability to force spend, put expiration dates on money, do negative interest rates, blacklists, to censor payments, confiscate stuff easily. In the same way that like communities that Arrika works with are systematically discriminated against with regard to like the war on drugs, and with the prison system and with the court system and the banking system and the way it's all rigged. I mean, just wait until you see Fed coin. This thing's going to be so discriminatory, and there's no fixing it. Okay. So politicians that stand up for Bitcoin at least will give citizens an option to do something else, to enter into an open and fair system. And at the end of the day, like, if you're telling me that our society is only possible because of this parasitic banking industry, then that's not a society I want to live in. And I really do believe that America will be great and strong, in a future that's a Bitcoin standard. I mean, we have a lot to gain. We're an open society with open capital markets and property rights and free speech. Like, compare us to the Chinese Communist Party or any of these other governments that are threatening to be like the world power, right? I mean, Bitcoin is going to be much more friendly to us than it is to them. So, I mean, I would definitely challenge what Brad is saying. At the end of the day, we have a social contract, and Bitcoiners, by and large, if they live in a society and they own property and they're part of a community, I mean, they will be paying their taxes. The majority of them are going to be, they're going to be paying their taxes. It's just that taxation regime is going to be a tighter dialogue between the people and the government. I think it'll be more streamlined. It'll be more efficient. There'll be more daylight. People will know about where the tax money's going. Today, people have no idea where it goes. Why are they going up? Why are these rates going up and down? Why are you penalizing this group of people and not the other group of people? It's all very confusing. I think Bitcoin drives us to a place where like these conversations are more out in the open, and where this really money and economics and finance are more at the heart of our conversation, and not something that's like kind of in the back page of the newspapers for like the smart people or whatever. Like, this is ridiculous. I mean, it really should be core.
And you said something that's really, really important, is that people should be able to decide what's best for them. So if they want to invest in Bitcoin, they should be able to invest in Bitcoin. If that's their decision. And I think Bitcoin, for me, I think we need more bipartisanship in politics in general. I'm very, very big on this, that we have to try to find common ground. And I would, after doing my research and talking to different people, I love the fact that people from all political spectrums support Bitcoin and think that it can be advantageous for everyone. From like the very far left to people that are on the far right, in the middle. I think that's something important to know. And we have to find those pockets where we can bring people together and not just attack someone because of, certain policies. I think anytime we can find those happy mediums, I think we should take advantage of it.
I agree completely. That's really well said. Arrika, I know you have to jet. Do you want to say anything else or closing words? Where can people find you? How can people support your campaign?
Yeah, again, thank you for having me. And I appreciate the Bitcoin community for going out of their way, above and beyond, to reach out to me, to educate me, to share information. I'm really learning so much, and I'm continuing to learn. I think that I'm very open to even having a Bitcoin caucus in Congress just to keep the conversation going. I feel like when you're trying to promote these pieces of legislation to ban something, I think there needs to be a space where the other side can say, wait, no. Are you aware of this? Are you aware of this? And provide the information. And a good friend of mine who's also running for Congress, her name is Reverend Wendy. We have very similar platforms. She's also very pro Bitcoin and is excited about the possibility of having a Bitcoin caucus if we get elected in 2022. So I just want to thank the Bitcoin community for being so supportive of that. And I'm at arikaforcongress.com, AARIKA for Congress. Please consider donating to my campaign. We do accept Bitcoin. And I just appreciate the community overall. I really do. I'm learning a tremendous amount of wonderful knowledge, and I'm excited to be a part of this and support.
Likewise, the other way around. Thanks so much for seeking us out and getting into this community, and being willing to listen and talk to everybody. You've been very proactive about reaching out and just building a network in the community. So it's great to see.
And I want to just say this. I'm sorry. I want to say one thing. I'm not doing this for just votes or for money. I'm not. Like I've seen comments like that. That's not true. I really believe in learning, and I really believe in finding common ground with people. I'm not running for Congress for any other reason, but I really want to help. And I was very clear at the beginning of this that my end goal is to be on the Education and Labor Committee in Congress and fight for education reform. And financial literacy is a part of that. And I really think that that's important. And so I really want to make that very clear to people that I'm a school teacher. I file because I see injustices. I'm doing the best I can to try to bring a new way of what it means to campaign, what it means to be in office. I believe in being a public servant. Our campaign is rooted in community service and young people and modernizing things. I think our government is so outdated, and I'm not convinced that the people in Washington are sitting there wanting to help everyday people. I'm not convinced of that. I've been on conversations with many of them, and everything is a political calculated move, and it's to the disservice of everyday people. And I actually stand against that. And so I just really want to make that very, very clear.
I appreciate that. Appreciate that message and approach for sure.
All right, you guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Aarika.
Take care.
Bye.
Good luck. Hey, Alex.
Hey. Do we want to recap a little bit or what?
Yeah, let's recap a little bit. Here's just to kind of build on to what you were talking about. Here's another quote that's even more direct, and I think this issue needs to be discussed because I am more and more, the Bitcoin quote unquote community or whatever, people who are getting into the space are diversifying, like Aarika was saying, and we're getting, especially on political spectrum, more and more people from the left, not the libertarian community, not on the right so much, as we are seeing a lot of people come in from the left, liberals, for instance, and being questions about, like how, like we need the U.S. government. The U.S. government is good. Yes, it needs reform. Yes, it needs to be changed. Yes, we're going to change it through political activity, etc. And Bitcoin will destabilize our government because it's taking away the power of the dollar. And here's what Brad Sherman had to say. Cryptocurrency either doesn't work, in which case investors lose a lot of money, or it does achieve its objectives, perhaps, and displaces the US dollar or interferes with the US dollar being virtually the sole reserve currency around the world. With the implication, okay, he said, he cited many benefits. This is from an article. He cited many benefits of the US dollar's dominance over other currencies for Americans, such as profits generated by the Federal Reserve or the US Treasury, and the ability to influence, which I think is an interesting choice of words, could be coerce, other countries' policies and actions through the use of economic sanctions. So this is just something I want to talk about is, people are worried, right? People are worried that the Bitcoin comes around and it destroys the United States.
Yeah, I think this is a high level conversation that like the average person in our country is not going to have. I mean, this is a future looking conversation. It is important. And I do agree with Brad that the world's going to change. I disagree that it's going to be bad for America. What he doesn't mention, and that what many, not many, actually, a handful of people like, especially in the macro investing community have pointed out, for example, like Luke Groman and Lynn Alden and some others, that, this sort of dollar hegemony has been really rough for like most Americans, probably. We talk about people who are probably in Brad's district and his constituents, like the ones in the sort of lower income, middle income brackets, like have not fared very well since the 70s in terms of real income, things like that. Of course, if you're in the elite, if you're in the coastal elite, if you've been in technology or investment or insurance or banking, like you've done amazingly well in the last 40 years. But if you're not, if you're in manufacturing or, some other service job, if you're in, retail, etc. Like I don't know if you've done that well, right? So this idea that dollar hegemony has been really, really great for America, I think is really flawed. I think it's
Yep.
been great for like a very small amount of Americans, and it's benefited them tremendously. Like what Brad said, oh, it'll like take away our profit stream at the Fed. Exactly. Like where does that go?
Yep.
I mean, it goes to like the Washington elite. So let's cut that out. Actually, let's like remove that profit stream. That over time, this kind of just forces the government to be in a closer relationship with the people. No one has like a long-term answer as to like what that looks like. It's impossible. We don't have a crystal ball. But like clearly, like this reduces waste. I think it clearly will like reduce our ability to have these like forever wars and to have this wasteful social spending. We live in a country of a lot of different opinions. A lot of people have varying opinions on what role the government should have in our lives. There's going to be a lot of people who, and maybe certain states, as we are today, are more, more about more government, and some are less so. I mean, I think you're going to see this in America, like increase this kind of like state by state nature of our country.
Mm-hmm.
And great, they can have those conversations, but I can guarantee you in a Bitcoin standard, like even the states that are going to be more about like government-led, social support network are going to be a lot less wasteful. Like you won't have a situation where like America today, where like we spend, I think per capita, some huge amount on healthcare, like
Yep.
government healthcare money, and yet like our standards in any reasonable, comparison are like way behind other countries that spend less per capita.
Right.
This is because of this
When you
enormous
can when
amount
you
of
can print
waste from the
money,
companies. Yeah, exactly.
you can just let's throw money at the problem. You can print it,
Yeah, so I think that like long term, like it'll lead to a leaner, meaner America that's like, better for the average citizen. Now, something else I wanted to touch on is that like I think that Bitcoiners should think about this carefully, because we're in like a transitionary moment, right? Like in 30 years, like it's going to be different. But like right now, you're going to have candidates that are pro Bitcoin, and for now, there's not that many, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, for me, I would think about it as like a single issue voter almost, or you could think about it that way. Like you're not gonna find a single candidate that you agree with on everything. And most of us in the Bitcoin community are very skeptical of politicians. Like some are better than others, but like in general, we're kind of skeptical of the whole process. Okay, fine. But I do think it's worth thinking about this as like okay, this person's pro Bitcoin. All right, well, maybe I'll support them. Because like we need to understand that Bitcoin is the thing that's going to change the system. Like some policy is not going to change the system. Replacing this person with that person is not going to change the system. But like Bitcoin becoming a bigger part of our lives and our social contract, that's what's going to change the system. So it is interesting to think about, like, regardless of like where you are on campaign finance reform, for example, or whatever issue you're on, like it's interesting to think about the idea of like kind of just being a single issue voter, right? And just being like, I'm going to support, I'm going to donate to, and it's going to be bipartisan. There's obviously going to be Republicans, Democrats. There's going to be many different pro Bitcoin candidates over the next 5 years. It's interesting to think about the idea of just like, I'm just going to support all the pro Bitcoin candidates, right? As like a strategy, right? Like, I mean, we don't know, that doesn't exist yet because they barely exist yet, right? But they're coming into power now, and it's going to be great to see this like Bitcoin caucus, which is definitely going to happen. You're going to have Cynthia Loomis, you're going to have people like Arrika. They're going to disagree intensely on like 9 out of 10 things, but they're going to agree on the Bitcoin thing, which I think again is great. And I think again, much like there are people in the United States that care about one issue in particular, or maybe 2 issues, and that's really what steers their vote. That's going to happen with Bitcoin. You're going to have, I believe internationally, we're going to have like countries are going to have the Bitcoin party, and like people are going to vote for the Bitcoin party. Like, and there's going to be other parties, but like, I think in the future, the Bitcoin party is going to be a very powerful party, and it's basically going to capture, I think, a lot of votes from a lot of people who are otherwise pretty disaffected, and they're just going to have one issue, and they're going to making it easier for you to be a Bitcoin citizen, basically. I mean, I think we'll be there, what their overall platform is, which of course is topical for you, a citizen Bitcoin. So.
Citizen Bitcoin. Yeah, I mean, these thoughts were in my head when I chose that handle, and the name of the podcast is that there's a lot more here than just money. This is could potentially influence the way we organize society, and in the future there will be Bitcoin citizens. And what will that mean? It's not just going to be some, in my mind, like anarchic, independent, people organized without rule of law or social contracts. But I think it'll be a more independent person that lives in a system that we have more control over, because we have insight into where the money's going. We have, we know that the government can't print money to empower themselves, et cetera.
Yeah, and I think it's a two-stage struggle, right? All of a sudden, I think the struggle is quite clearly we need to get rid of the politicians who are enemies of Bitcoin. That's kind of the shared goal, right? Brad Sherman needs to go. He needs to go. I mean, he's a dinosaur, and he's a creature of the banking system. And regardless of what you think about campaign finance reform, he needs to go. And there's different ways of doing that, and they're not easy, but he needs to go. And at the same time, we want to support I hope we want to support Bitcoin candidates, right? Or we want to support candidates who are more open to Bitcoin, right? I mean, it's really I think a great thing. So, whether you're just focused on getting rid of the Bitcoin enemies, or whether you're just focused on supporting the Bitcoin friends, I mean, both can work. And I fully understand that, like, a lot of Bitcoiners, most of them aren't Americans. The overwhelming majority of Bitcoiners aren't Americans, but they're in their own countries. And I also understand that a lot of Bitcoiners don't really want to be involved in the political process. They don't believe in it. That's also fine. Bitcoin, again, I think is the force for change. It's gonna change the world regardless of what politicians do or don't do. But we can expedite the process for our own countries, and we can actually help more people get involved earlier than they would otherwise. I don't think Bitcoin needs our help, but people need our help. And I think that by opposing Bitcoin enemies to whatever extent we can, and by supporting Bitcoin friends to whatever extent we can get more people involved sooner rather than later. And that's the mission of Swan, right? So I mean, I think that kind of makes sense to me.
Yeah, I agree completely. And it's it's why we're here. I mean, Bitcoin doesn't necessarily need us, but people do. And I think we can shepherd, so to say, Bitcoin to the world in the best way possible and present it in the best way possible. So I think, these false narratives that will come out, what we like to call FUD, will just get louder and louder. And so we need to build our megaphone through, just a grassroots organic effort, through number go up and however else we're going to teach these Bitcoiners what matters and why this is important and how to answer those kind of criticisms. So
yeah, the last thing I'll say is just that if you're a business in the Bitcoin space, like, long term, we know it's going down. Like, we know Bitcoin's happening, but like short term stuff can get real nasty. It very well may. And that's where you're going to want to oppose Brad Sherman. Like, you have a business interest in opposing Brad Sherman. I mean, Brad Sherman could try to turn off. And when I say Brad Sherman, I'm using him as a proxy for the anti-Bitcoin coalition, not just in Congress, but in the U.S. government, in the powers that be, et cetera, et cetera. These people could try to turn off the on-ramps and off-ramps for American citizens. They could try to make it really freaking difficult for Americans to get into Bitcoin. I don't necessarily think it's likely, but it's possible. So that's why, as a Bitcoin business, you're going to want to support Bitcoin candidates. And you want to, if all you're doing is opposing the enemies of Bitcoin, like, you have a vested interest in supporting the Bitcoin candidates, because the Bitcoin enemies can make it really freaking difficult for you to do what you want to do and serve people Bitcoin. Like, that is going to become compromised by people like Brad Sherman, because again, the lifeblood of the hand that feeds them is at risk. I mean, this profligate, exclusionary, discriminatory, extortionate banking system is in danger, is seriously in danger. Bitcoin is a threat, right? So a lot of them don't quite understand that yet, but those that do, will start coming out firing like Brad. And that's where you just want to you just want to replace Brad. And regardless of what the person who replaces Brad is, regardless of what their opinions are on, like, pretty much any other topic, the fact that they're open to Bitcoin and that they want to teach about it to kids, I mean, and that they're not going to ban it. I mean, that should be like, those are the 3 boxes to check. Like, okay, you're not going to ban it. You want to help more people learn about it, and you're going to help it become part of like the way we can support politicians. Sign me up. Like, I mean,
Right.
yeah, like you're going to disagree with literally every politician on God knows what else. But if we can have like a strategy to like get rid of the Shermans and replace them with people that are at least going to be open to Bitcoin, I mean, that's going to make for a much smoother ride, I would imagine, over the coming years. Again, we all know where the ride ends, but like, it's going to be choppy, you know,
Yep.
to get there. Very choppy. And we could reduce the turbulence by getting more friends in power. So I think that's why it's kind of cool you had the show. Obviously, I think what Eric is doing is quite cool. I look forward to more politicians being as honest and open. You know, she's very honest about the fact that she doesn't know everything about Bitcoin, and none of us do. Every day is a learning experience. That's awesome.
Appreciate that.
I love that she's reading everything, you know, reading Safe's book, reading all these different books. Great, read it all and then make your own opinions, you know. But you got to read it. You know, most of the critics of Bitcoin don't do the reading, and she's committed to doing the reading and being open-minded. And she's going to have opinions that are very, very different from a lot of Bitcoiners. Fantastic. There's a diverse world out there. But the one thing that we can come together on is that children should learn about Bitcoin. I think that's amazing. So I really think that's cool. So if she's going to do that, if she's going to push for less restrictions on Bitcoin, if she's going to push for Bitcoin to be more of a part of the way that we interact with our politicians, that's cool. I really think that's cool. So bravo to her.
Yeah, bravo to her. Good luck to Aarika, and agree with everything that you're saying there. I think obviously you could draw like what I was thinking was of there is you can draw a corollary between banks supporting Brad Sherman and Bitcoin companies supporting Aarika Rhodes. What's the difference, right? I mean, one, she says she's going to take money from individuals only and not, or at least resist or whatever, taking money from businesses. If I understood it correctly, that may not be the case. But what's the difference, right? You're just this Bitcoin industry is just going to replace the banking industry, and then they're going to have all the control, in Congress over these politicians, et cetera. I think the big difference is like there is a regulatory interest in not funding candidates, right, and saying like, okay, support our product in Congress. So there's obviously a regulatory interest there, but there's not like we need the government, we need the Federal Reserve because it's the lifeblood of our entire industry, which is an industry that's grown to be some absurd percentage of the U.S. economy over the past 50 years. So if basically it's like existential threat versus a regulatory threat, and so I think there's a difference there, and there's also arguments to be made about campaign finance reform, but I'm not going to have those.
Yeah, no. I guess what I was getting at with that is like we're not going to fight Brad with this. We don't want to cede to him the arena, like the arena of yes, we still win in the arena of like, is this good for America? But that's such a difficult arena. It's like so speculative. We have no idea what the future holds. I want the arena to be, are you going to allow Americans to use Bitcoin, or are you going to force them to use FedCoin? That's the arena. Like, Brad Sherman wants to force you to use FedCoin. Okay, see you later, Brad Sherman. Like we can have, that's the arena. It needs to be about the war on cash. It needs to be about freedoms and liberties now for people today. It needs to be about opposing politicians who've been gaslighting America by saying Bitcoin's dangerous and risky, when in fact it's been dangerous and risky to hold cash over to hold dollars over the last decade. Extremely dangerous and risky to hold dollars in cash compared to Bitcoin over the last decade. So we need to be fighting the gaslighting, and we need to be just encouraging people to look at the facts and look at the truth, and look at Bitcoin's performance against any of these other investable assets or whatever else like the Fed wants to prop up. They want you to be, Brad Sherman wants you to be buying, negative yielding government debt. Like that, he wants you to be buying corporate paper from these banks. He wants you to be, buying the stocks of the companies that are paying him off. Like that's what he wants. So like, screw that. So, we can just invest in Bitcoin instead. So that's really the plan B, right?
Plan B. All right. Thanks, Alex. I really appreciate your time, man. That was a good conversation and
a lot of fun. Thanks for having me, Brady.
Yeah, one that I hope that we're going to continue to have, over the next year or two as we build up the Bitcoin caucus.
100%.
All right. Okay, well, that was an interesting one, something a little different, and I think a conversation that is very important for us to be having, and we will continue to have them more and more, I think, over the next couple of years, 3 years, as more Bitcoin politicians enter races in the United States political system, and it'll become a more and more discussed issue. And I really do hope, very honestly hope, that this will become a bipartisan issue across the political spectrum. And I think it should be. I think that there are many reasons that Bitcoin appeals to all political expectations, all political types throughout the nation. So I want to fight to make Bitcoin sort of understood across the political spectrum, because I do think that having it isolated and become like a red-blue issue in this country could be, a bad thing, lead to some bad outcomes, at least temporarily in the short run for Bitcoin. So interested to hear what you all think. Hit us up on Twitter. There's a thread going for this show on Swan Bitcoin, at Swan Bitcoin, or on my handle at Citizen Bitcoin. And while you're at it, head over to Swan Bitcoin, support Bitcoin. We do the best we can to support our new members. We put them on an educational track, send emails once a week that walks through all aspects of Bitcoin, from money to the tech to privacy to all of those aspects of Bitcoin, so that they'll understand what's going on, what they're getting into. We have a fantastic client services team who are there to answer questions for you and on the ball, do it quickly. We have an incredible team who are onboarding entities, corporations, trusts, and individuals at Swan Private, swanbitcoin.com/private. And we have the fastest entity onboarding in the country for any of those entities. And I think in the world, I haven't checked out the rest of the world, but we're onboarding sometimes in 3 days, 3 to 5, 7 days, something like that. We certainly are having entities being onboarded 3 days from the time of document submission. So that's pretty incredible. We know that some of our customers will tend to apply to 3 or 4 different services at the same time and just kind of see which one comes through the fastest. And we hear that it's months at Coinbase and Kraken and some other competitors as well, whereas it's a matter of days or a week here at Swan. So very friendly in terms of onboarding your company or your entity. So if you know someone who is of high net worth or looking to buy $1,000 or $100,000 or more Bitcoin in the next 12 months, or any entity, corporation, for instance, looking to put some Bitcoin on their treasury, send them to swanbitcoin.com/private, and we will get them taken care of. And of course, our stacking service is still there. We're constantly making upgrades to the service. 0.99% will get you stacking every day, a week, or month. And with that comes a lot of education and that great service and support that I mentioned, and access to the team. So we find that a lot of our clients are, happy to have that kind of sense of support there for an asset that often is relatively new to them. So send your friends and family our way. If you are doing that, go ahead and use your Swan Force referral link. You'll stack 25% of their fees for a year. And that can add up to some meaningful sats. I love to see in my dashboard the deposits for my referrals popping in, and it's really fun just to pop in and see those sats accumulating in my account. They are meaningful amounts of sats, so the more that you can refer, the better. You can go to swanbitcoin.com/enlist and join. I think we're at 6,000 people now, 6,000 people strong on the Swan Force, something like that. And it's going strong. We have Camilla Campton, who's kind of running the show there now, and she's been talking to a lot of our Swan Force members and just seeing what works for them and helping them think about ways to be more successful in accruing more referrals. So get on the Swan Force. Camilla's there to help out. And you can definitely stack some meaningful sats. It's awesome to see our Bitcoiners, referral Bitcoiners or Swan Force members accumulating a bunch of different sats. All the different sats, are they fungible? They're fungible, so it's not different sats. Anyway, they're accumulating a lot of sats. That's all that matters. And we're going to close this one up. Next week, we had to delay this episode a week. So next week, we will have Lynn Alden and Elise Colleen, another great episode. So be sure to tune into that one. You can go to our YouTube page right now at youtube.com/swansignal and set a reminder for that episode. All right. Take care, everyone.